Jonas Trevane stepped out of the shuttle's airlock, brushing the cuffs of his uniform as he gazed up at the towering spires of Xintha Prime's capital city. His partner and longtime friend, Dr. Alec Morgan, adjusted his translator earpiece and muttered, "I can't believe we're really here." The city was unlike anything either of them had ever seen. Structures that seemed to float, translucent walkways winding through the air, and a sky that shimmered with unfamiliar colors. They had been briefed extensively on Xinthan culture and protocol, but nothing could have prepared them for the sheer alien beauty of this place. Jonas turned to Alec, his brow furrowed. "Remember, we're here to negotiate peace, not to be awestruck tourists. Right?" Alec said, shaking his head. "Still, I think I just saw a building dissolve and reform itself. Kind of hard not to be impressed." As the pair approached the grand entrance of Queen Erixel's palace, two Xinthan guards blocked their path. Their crystalline armor refracted the sunlight into dazzling hues, and their insectoid faces remained expressionless. Jonas gave a respectful nod and held up the diplomatic credentials embedded in his tablet. The guards exchanged a few clicks and whirs, then stepped aside. Inside, the palace was an architectural marvel, all curves and spirals, with walls that seemed to hum faintly. Jonas and Alec walked side by side, their boots echoing on the smooth, glass-like floor. Alec leaned closer. "So what's the plan if this goes south? Because these folks don't exactly look like the forgiving type." Jonas glanced at him and smirked. "Let's focus on making sure it doesn't go south." Before Alec could respond, they entered the grand audience chamber. Queen Erixel sat on a throne that appeared to be carved from living crystal. She was flanked by her counselors, each more imposing than the last. Erixel herself radiated an aura of authority. Her eyes, larger than a human's, seemed to pierce straight through Jonas as he stepped forward. Jonas bowed his head briefly, but as Alec started to lower himself into a bow, Jonas put a hand on his shoulder. Alec straightened awkwardly. The room was silent as the two humans stood tall before the queen. Jonas spoke first. "Your Majesty, thank you for granting us this audience. My name is Jonas Trevane, and this is Dr. Alec Morgan. We represent the United Earth Diplomatic Corps. Our purpose here is to discuss a path toward mutual cooperation and understanding between our people." Erixel's voice, though melodic, carried an edge that made even Alec shiver. Cooperation? Understanding? These are not words I often hear from those who seek my favor. Most kneel and offer tributes. Yet you, human, stand as if you are my equal. Why should I listen to your words when you refuse to show proper respect? Jonas held her gaze. "Respect is shown in many ways, Your Majesty. I believe in earning it through dialogue and action, not empty gestures." Erixel's eyes narrowed, and the chamber filled with a tense silence. Finally, she spoke. "You are bold, Jonas Trevane. Boldness can be dangerous, but it can also be intriguing. What does humanity offer that I should even consider cooperation?" Jonas stepped closer, undaunted. "Humanity offers perspective, a different way of thinking. We may not have your resources or your centuries of experience, but we bring innovation, creativity, and a willingness to find solutions that benefit all parties. I believe we can complement each other, not compete." Erixel raised a hand, silencing her counselors who had begun murmuring. She leaned forward, studying Jonas and Alec with an intensity that made Alec glance nervously at his partner. Finally, she nodded. "You may speak further," she said. "But know this, if your words fail to impress me, your journey here will be your last." Jonas didn't flinch. "Understood. Let's begin." As the discussions commenced, Alec found himself amazed at Jonas' ability to remain composed under Erixel's scrutiny. The Queen's questions were sharp, probing, and often laden with subtle traps. But Jonas answered each one with confidence and clarity. Alec occasionally chimed in, providing technical details and human cultural references when needed. Hours passed. Erixel listened, her expression unreadable, while her counselors grew restless. By the end of the first session, no agreement had been reached, but neither had the humans been dismissed. As the guards escorted Jonas and Alec to their quarters within the palace, Alec let out a long breath. "You're playing with fire," he said, shaking his head. Jonas smirked. "It's the only way to stay warm out here." Chapter 2. A Challenge of Wills. Jonas and Alec sat at the ornate table, the Xinthan strategy board spread out before them. Its complex, multi-layered grid shimmered with lights and holographic markers. The Queen had issued her challenge, a game of Shylith, one of the most intricate tests of intellect and strategy known in Xinthan culture. Her voice, sharp and controlled, cut through the still air. "If you are as innovative as you claim, human, then prove it. Beat me at Shylith, and I will grant your request for extended negotiations." Alec leaned over, whispering to Jonas, "This might be a problem. Shylith is supposed to be impossible for outsiders to master." Jonas kept his eyes on the board, studying its layers. "Then we'll have to learn fast." Orixel watched them with a mixture of amusement and curiosity. "I will allow you a few minutes to discuss among yourselves before we begin. It would not be fair otherwise." Alec grinned nervously. "Generous. Thanks for that." Turning back to Jonas, he muttered, "Okay. So what's the plan here?" Jonas tilted his head, considering the intricacies of the holographic grid. The pieces moved not only on a two-dimensional plane but also shifted vertically, creating a dynamic three-dimensional pattern. "We start simple. Treat the opening moves like chess, control the center, gain territory. Once we understand her strategy, we adapt." Alec nodded. "So, I stall while you figure out her game? Got it." When the allotted time expired, Orixel tapped the table and the board reset. She made the first move, placing a crystalline marker on the lower right corner of the grid. The lights on the board changed, casting a faint blue glow over the room. "Your turn," she said smoothly, gesturing at Jonas and Alec. Jonas moved confidently, placing a piece near the center. Orixel's lips curved slightly. "Interesting. You aim to control the middle. A predictable opening." Alec crossed his arms and smirked. "Sometimes predictable is the best option. Keeps everyone on their toes." Orixel's second move shifted the entire structure of the grid, rearranging layers and opening new paths. Alec blinked at the display. "Well, that's unexpected, is it?" Orixel asked, her tone playful but sharp. "Your position is already compromised. Perhaps you are not as prepared as you claim." Jonas leaned in, examining the new layout. "She's trying to force us into a defensive position early," he whispered to Alec. "We need to counter by spreading out, not clumping together." Alec made the next move, placing a piece on the opposite side of the board. Orixel's brow furrowed slightly. "Ah, an attempt at misdirection. I see you have more depth than I thought." As the game progressed, Jonas and Alec alternated their moves, their coordination improving with each turn. They whispered quietly, refining their strategy, their movements becoming more deliberate. Orixel, however, remained calm, her confidence unshaken. She leaned back in her chair, observing their progress as though she were playing a casual game against a pair of children. "This is one of our oldest traditions," she remarked, moving another piece. "It's not just a test of intelligence. It reveals character, intention. Every choice you make speaks volumes." "And what's it saying about us so far?" Jonas asked, moving a piece into a seemingly vulnerable position. Orixel tilted her head. "You are bold, perhaps reckless. Yet there is a strange cohesion between the two of you. I did not expect such a partnership." Alec smiled. "Teamwork's kind of our thing. You'll find we're full of surprises." Hours passed as the board shifted and rearranged, pieces multiplying and disappearing. Jonas and Alec adapted quickly, their moves becoming increasingly unpredictable. Orixel's counselors, watching from the edges of the room, exchanged quiet murmurs of surprise. The humans were lasting far longer than expected. Finally, Orixel placed her last piece, and the board lit up in a cascading pattern of colors. "The game is over." Alec glanced at Jonas. "How'd we do?" Orixel's lips pressed into a thin line. "You did not win, but you also did not lose." Jonas raised an eyebrow. A draw. In Shylith, there are many levels of victory and defeat, she replied. To hold your own against me is rare. It suggests you have much to offer. Enough, perhaps, to warrant further discussions. Jonas nodded slowly. So, the negotiations continue. For now, Orixel said. She rose from her seat, her long robe shimmering as she moved toward the door. But do not mistake this for a final concession. I will expect more from you, Jonas Trevane. Much more. As she left, Alex slumped back in his chair, letting out a long breath. Well, that wasn't terrifying at all. Jonas smirked, glancing at the still glowing board. We held our ground. That's what matters. Sure, and all we had to do was sweat through 4 hours of alien mind chess. Jonas stood, stretching his shoulders. It's a start. Let's get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be tougher. Chapter 3. An Uneasy Accord. Jonas and Alex sat in the grand meeting chamber, facing Queen Orixel and her council. The room, carved from the shimmering crystalline material unique to Xintha Prime, seemed to pulse faintly with an almost imperceptible rhythm. Alec glanced sideways at Jonas, murmuring, I still can't believe we're sitting here. I mean, they should have thrown us out by now. Jonas kept his focus on the queen. Let's not give them a reason to. Orixel's gaze shifted between them, her features sharp and unyielding. She finally spoke, her voice cutting through the heavy silence. You humans have lasted longer than most would have thought possible. Yet I am not yet convinced of the value you claim to bring. Jonas clasped his hands together on the table. Then let us show you. A demonstration of what we can offer. Technology, cooperation, even cultural exchange. I think you'll find we have more in common than you might expect. Orixel raised an eyebrow, her fingers drumming lightly on the table's surface. Commonality? We are as different as light and shadow, Jonas Trevane. What could your fragile species possibly have in common with the Xinthan Dominion? Alec leaned forward, meeting her gaze directly. We both face challenges that can't be solved alone. Your empire is vast, but that means it's stretched thin. Resources, logistics, and maintaining control over distant systems, these are problems humanity understands. We've had to learn adaptability. Orixel tilted her head, her expression neutral. Adaptability. And what would you offer as proof that your kind is more than a nuisance in the galactic order? Jonas replied steadily, Give us the chance to demonstrate our methods. We can work with your envoys, share knowledge, and collaborate on something meaningful. Not just trade or technology, but real understanding. A partnership. The Queen's counselors exchanged uneasy glances, their discomfort clear. One of them, a tall figure with a shimmering green exoskeleton, spoke up. Your Majesty, these humans speak boldly, but their words are untested. They have no foothold here, no alliances of note. Why should we waste time on their proposals? Jonas met the counselor's gaze unflinching. Because we're willing to prove ourselves. If you believe we're not worth your time, give us a task. Something that matters to you, something challenging. Let us show what we can do. Orixel leaned back in her seat, her long, elegant fingers steepled in thought. Very well, human. You claim to value partnership, but the Xinthan Dominion has no time for idle gestures. There is a resource issue on one of our peripheral colonies. An unstable mining operation threatening to disrupt a key trade route. I will allow you to address this problem. If you succeed, we will consider further discussions. Alec glanced at Jonas, his expression uncertain. A mining operation? We're diplomats, not engineers. Jonas replied calmly, We adapt, remember? We'll figure it out. Orixel's lips curved into a faint, enigmatic smile. Then we are agreed. I will have my envoys provide you with the necessary details. Your shuttle will depart in the morning. I trust that your success will be more than just words. As the council dismissed them, Alex sighed heavily, following Jonas out of the chamber. So what's the plan now? You just signed us up to fix an alien mining disaster. We've got access to their envoys, Jonas said, walking briskly. We can ask questions, get the data, and figure out how to stabilize the situation. This is exactly what we wanted. A chance to prove we can contribute. Alec shook his head. And if we fail? Jonas glanced at him, his expression serious. We don't fail. The next morning, the two men boarded a Xinthan shuttle, guided by a crew of alien technicians. The flight to the colony was tense, neither Jonas nor Alec speaking much. When they arrived, they were met by a stern-faced Xinthan overseer who wasted no time launching into an explanation of the problem. The mine's primary energy conduit was destabilizing, threatening a chain reaction that could destroy the entire facility and cut off a critical resource supply. Alec muttered under his breath. Great, so we're supposed to fix something that's one step away from blowing up. Jonas gave him a sharp look. We'll figure it out. Over the course of several hours, Jonas and Alec worked with the Xinthan technicians, studying their technology, analyzing data, and devising a plan. Alec proved surprisingly adept at interpreting the alien schematics, while Jonas coordinated between the teams, keeping the crew focused and on task. Pass me that interface module, Alec said, his hands busy connecting a series of cables. Jonas grabbed the device and handed it over. We've got about 20 minutes before the next power surge. Are you sure this will hold? It'll hold, Alec said, frowning in concentration. If we can reroute the flow through these backup conduits, we'll buy enough time to stabilize the primary circuit. When the final connections were made, Alec took a step back, wiping sweat from his brow. Okay, try it now. One of the Xinthan technicians activated the system. The conduits glowed softly, and the readings on the monitor began to stabilize. A collective sigh of relief passed through the room. The overseer, who had been watching silently, finally spoke. You have done well, humans. I admit I doubted your capabilities. Jonas turned to Alec, a hint of a smile on his face. What did I say? We adapt. The overseer nodded. The Queen will be informed of your success. You have earned the right to continue negotiations. As they boarded the shuttle back to Xintha Prime, Alec leaned back in his seat, exhausted but satisfied. You know, you're starting to make me believe we might actually pull this off. Jonas smiled faintly. We don't have a choice. If we want peace, we have to prove we're worth it. Chapter 4. The Queen's Curiosity. Back in the grand hall of the palace, Jonas and Alec stood before Queen Orks once more. The mood was different now. Where there had once been open skepticism, there was now a flicker of interest in the Queen's sharp gaze. Her counselors, previously tense and bristling, stood quietly at the edges of the chamber. You succeeded, Orks said, her tone as even and unreadable as ever. I must admit, humans, your approach was not what I expected. Alec stepped forward, scratching the back of his neck as he replied, We're full of surprises. It's kind of our thing. Jonas shot Alec a look, though a faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Our species values cooperation and problem-solving. That's what we wanted to demonstrate, and I hope you can see how working together benefits both sides. Orks leaned back on her throne, her intricate, crystalline robes catching the light. Working together, a concept easier spoken than practiced. Still, you have shown adaptability. She looked directly at Jonas. Tell me, human, why do you pursue this path? What drives you? Jonas met her gaze, unflinching. Because I believe peace is worth the effort. I've seen what happens when different peoples misunderstand each other, and I've seen the costs of conflict. We don't want that for humanity or for you. Orks' lips pressed into a thin line, as if weighing his words. Alec shifted uncomfortably beside him, muttering, Nice speech. Orks' eyes flicked to Alec, and her voice softened ever so slightly. And you, Dr. Morgan? Do you share your partner's ideals? Alec shrugged, his tone casual. I'm just here to keep him out of trouble. Someone has to make sure he doesn't get himself killed trying to talk people into peace treaties. Jonas shook his head, though he couldn't suppress a smile. Alec doesn't like to admit it, but he believes in this mission just as much as I do. He just has a unique way of showing it. Orks tilted her head, studying them both for a long moment. You two are an interesting pair. I cannot say I have met many of your kind who work so seamlessly together. She rose slowly from her throne, her movements graceful and deliberate. I find myself curious about your culture, your history. I wish to understand what drives humans to act as you do. Jonas took a step forward. We'd be happy to share. Cultural exchange is part of why we're here. Arixel's lips curled into what might have been a smile, though it was hard to tell. Then let us see if your words carry more substance than the usual rhetoric. Join me in my private study. I wish to hear more about this humanity you so proudly represent. Alec raised an eyebrow at Jonas, whispering, "Do we have to? I'm not exactly in the mood to give a history lesson." Jonas leaned closer to him and replied quietly, "This is exactly the kind of opportunity we need. Just go with it." In Arixel's study, the atmosphere was more relaxed, though still tinged with formality. The room was smaller, filled with intricate sculptures, holographic displays of distant star systems, and shelves of crystalline tablets etched with Xinthan script. Arixel motioned for them to sit across from her at a low table. "Your species has spread quickly," she began, her voice thoughtful. "Yet you lack the ancient lineage of many other civilizations in this region of space. How have you managed such rapid expansion?" Jonas leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "Humans are driven by curiosity. We explore not just out of necessity, but out of a desire to learn and grow. When we encounter something new, we adapt. That's how we've always survived." Alec chuckled softly, leaning back in his chair. "It's also because we can't leave well enough alone. If there's a star out there, we have to go see what's on the other side. It's not always a good thing, but it's what we do." Arixel seemed amused by Alec's remark, though she didn't say so outright. "Your people sound as though they are. That peace is worth working for." Arixel considered his words in silence for a moment. "Peace. Do you truly think it is achievable? Among such different species, with conflicting needs and desires?" Jonas nodded firmly. "I do. But it takes effort. It takes patience, and a willingness to see things from another perspective. That's why we're here, to find that perspective and build something better." Alec added, "And we're not naive. We know it's not going to happen overnight. But if no one tries, it definitely won't happen. So here we are." Arixel's expression remained enigmatic, but there was a glimmer of something, approval perhaps, in her eyes. "You speak with conviction. Very well. I will consider what you have said. In the meantime, I will have my aides provide you with more information on the cultural exchange programs I intend to propose." "Thank you, Your Majesty," Jonas said. Alec gave a small wave. "Yeah, thanks. We'll do our best not to mess it up." Arixel rose, her posture regal. "Good. See that you do not. Our conversations are far from over." As they were escorted back to their quarters, Alec shook his head. "Cultural exchange programs, huh? Sounds like we just got more homework." Jonas chuckled. "It's a start, and every step we take helps build trust. I call that progress." Chapter 5: The Subtle Dance. The following days unfolded with a strange rhythm, as Jonas and Alec found themselves drawn deeper into Arixel's world. Their evenings often ended in the Queen's private study, where the line between formal negotiation and personal conversation began to blur. Over cups of steaming, iridescent Xinthan tea, Arixel questioned them endlessly. "Your Earth," she said one night, studying the holographic map Jonas had projected onto the low table. "You have divided it into many nations. Seems chaotic, disorganized. How have you managed to avoid fracturing completely?" Alec leaned back in his seat, gesturing with one hand. "Oh, we've tried. Plenty of times. History's full of wars, treaties, alliances that fell apart. Somehow we just kept going. When the stakes got high enough, we found ways to work together." Arixel arched a brow. "Pragmatism over unity, then. Fascinating. And yet, here you are, claiming to represent all of humanity. A singular voice for a divided species." Jonas chose his words carefully. "It's not about perfection. It's about intent. We may have our differences, but we share common goals. exploration, survival, progress. We come to you as representatives of that shared vision. Orixel studied him for a long moment, then turned her attention to the map. I find it curious how many of your nations are named after their leaders. It suggests a certain vanity. Alec grinned. Humans can be pretty vain, but that's not the whole story. We name places after leaders as a way of honoring them. Well, sometimes. Other times it's just politics. Her gaze returned to Jonas, her expression softening just slightly. And you? What would you name after yourself, if you had the choice? Jonas blinked, caught off guard by the personal question. Honestly, I've never thought about it. I'm not really the type to look for that kind of recognition. Alec chuckled. He's being modest. Jonas would name some big, boring library after himself. Or a debate hall. Jonas rolled his eyes. Very funny, Alec. How about you? What would you name after yourself? Alec pretended to consider the question. A beach resort. Alec's Isles. Nice ring to it. Even Orixel allowed a faint smile at that. Your partnership is unusual, she remarked. You complement each other, yet you do not hesitate to challenge one another. Is this common among your kind? Jonas nodded. When it works, yes. Trust comes from being able to speak openly, even if you don't always agree. Though I'm usually right, Alec added, smirking. Orixel shook her head, though her tone carried a hint of amusement. Your confidence is intriguing. Tell me, Jonas, how is it that you maintain such unwavering conviction? He hesitated, then said, I try to stay focused on what matters. I've seen enough conflict to know what's at stake. Every step we take here is a chance to build something better. And you? Orixel turned her attention to Alec. What motivates you? Why have you chosen this path, rather than a simpler life? Alec's easy demeanor shifted slightly, his tone more reflective. I guess I'm just stubborn. Once I start something, I don't like to quit. And when Jonas came to me with this idea, it seemed too important to ignore. So here I am. Orixel leaned back, her expression contemplative. Stubbornness. A useful trait if directed well. Perhaps that is one reason your species has advanced so quickly. The conversation drifted into other topics, Orixel asking about Earth's art, its music, and its many languages. Jonas and Alec took turns sharing stories, sometimes trading friendly jabs, sometimes drawing on each other's knowledge to provide more complete answers. The dynamic between them didn't go unnoticed by the Queen, whose questions became increasingly personal. By the time the evening ended, Orixel rose and regarded them both. You have given me much to consider. Perhaps tomorrow you might show me something of human art. I am curious how your creativity compares to your pragmatism. Jonas bowed his head slightly. We'd be honored. Alec stood as well, nodding. We'll put together something impressive. I promise. As they walked back to their quarters, Alec glanced at Jonas. You notice she keeps throwing in those personal questions? I think she's trying to figure us out. Of course she is, Jonas said. We're trying to figure her out, too. It's all part of the process. Alec laughed quietly. You think she's warming up to us? Jonas paused before replying. I think she's intrigued. And if we can keep that intrigue going, we might just make real progress here. Alec nodded, a hint of a smile on his face. All right, Captain Optimism. Let's get some rest. Tomorrow we're showing off art to an alien queen. No pressure. Jonas chuckled, clapping Alec on the shoulder as they headed down the corridor. No pressure at all. Chapter 6. A shared moment. The gallery was quiet, the only sounds being the faint hum of the holographic displays and the gentle footfalls of those who moved between them. Jonas and Alec had spent hours curating a selection of human art, from the ancient cave paintings of Lascaux to the digital projections of the 22nd century. Queen Orixel and a handful of her advisors were their audience. Orixel stopped in front of a swirling hologram that depicted a human hand, sketched in vibrant lines of light. And this? She asked. What does this represent? Jonas stepped forward, clasping his hands behind his back. It's a recreation of one of humanity's earliest recorded artworks. a handprint left behind on a cave wall tens of thousands of years ago. Some say it was a way of saying I was here, or we are here. Orixel tilted her head, studying the display. Such a simple mark, yet it carries weight. Was that its only purpose? No one knows for sure, Jonas admitted. But it shows that even back then, humans were trying to express something more than survival. They wanted to leave something behind, something that would last. Alec chuckled quietly from his spot near another projection. So basically, we've been drawing on walls since day one. Orixel turned to Alec, her antennae twitching slightly. And what about this one? She gestured toward a digital painting that shifted colors as one moved around it. Alec walked over, hands in his pockets. That's called Tides of Light. It was created by an artist who used neural interfaces to project their emotions directly onto the canvas. The colors change depending on the viewer's perspective. What you see might not be what I see. Fascinating, Orixel murmured. A piece that changes yet remains the same. It reflects the viewer's own perceptions. Such an approach is rare among the Xinthan. We value precision and permanence. Art that alters itself over time is considered unusual. Jonas stepped closer to her, his voice calm. Maybe that's one of the biggest differences between us. Humans see change as part of the story. It's not about preserving a single moment, but about how that moment evolves. She regarded him quietly, her gaze lingering. Perhaps this is why your people are difficult to define. You are always in motion, always shifting. Alex smirked. You say that like it's a bad thing. Orixel's expression softened, though her tone remained measured. Not bad, but unsettling. It's challenging to form a complete understanding of something that refuses to remain static. Jonas nodded. That's fair. But isn't that also what makes us interesting? We're always learning, always trying to be better. Orixel studied him for a moment before turning back to the displays. Perhaps. As the evening wore on, they moved through the gallery, discussing everything from music to sculpture. Alec cracked the occasional joke, lightening the mood, while Jonas maintained a steady, thoughtful dialogue with Orixel. Her advisors grew quieter as the night went on, leaving the three of them to speak more freely. When they reached the end of the gallery, Orixel paused before a piece that depicted Earth seen from orbit. The blue-green planet was rendered in exquisite detail, every cloud formation and ocean current captured in soft, glowing hues. She stood there for a long time, saying nothing. Jonas stepped beside her. It's called the Pale Blue Dot, a reminder of how small we are in the universe, but also how much we have to protect. Orixel's voice was almost a whisper. Your world is beautiful, fragile yet resilient. Jonas hesitated, then said quietly, It's not just our world. The universe is filled with beauty, and it's up to all of us to protect it. That's why we're here, Orixel, to find a way forward together. She turned to face him, her gaze steady. You speak with such conviction. Yet, it is not only your words that intrigue me. It is your actions, your willingness to stand before me as an equal, despite our differences. Few have dared to do so. Jonas met her eyes, his voice firm. I don't believe in standing apart. If we're going to move forward, we have to stand together. Alec cleared his throat, breaking the moment. Well, this has been fun and all, but I think we're about ready to wrap up for tonight, right? Orixel glanced at him, a faint smile playing at her lips. Indeed, it has been enlightening. As they exited the gallery, Alec leaned toward Jonas. You're getting good at this whole diplomacy thing. Jonas smirked. Just following your lead. Alec laughed. Sure. Next time I'll handle the profound speeches, and you can be the comic relief. They continued their banter as they walked through the palace corridors, the tension from earlier in their journey gradually giving way to a sense of camaraderie. The gallery visit had been a small step, but it was a step nonetheless, one that hinted at the possibility of genuine understanding between their peoples. Chapter 7. The Alliance Forged in Trust. In the dim light of Orixel's personal meeting chamber, Jonas and Alec took their seats. This time there were no advisors, no formalities. The queen had invited them to speak plainly, without the weight of courtly ceremony. Her crystalline robe seemed less imposing, and her tone more measured. "I have been reflecting on our discussions," Orks began, her gaze moving between the two men. "You are unlike any diplomats I have encountered. Perhaps that is why I find myself questioning what I once believed to be certain." Jonas folded his hands on the table. "What do you mean, Your Majesty?" Orks leaned slightly forward. "For centuries, the Xinthan Dominion has relied on domination, on overwhelming power, to maintain control and ensure stability. Yet here you are, without force, without subjugation, proposing that cooperation can achieve what we never thought possible." Alec smirked faintly, leaning back in his chair. "We humans do love our underdog stories." Jonas gave Alec a sharp look before turning back to Orks. "It's not about underdogs or who has more power. It's about seeing each other as equals and building trust. Without that, there's no foundation to stand on." Orks' eyes narrowed slightly. "Trust is not a commodity I give freely. It must be earned." Jonas nodded. "That's fair. And that's what we've been trying to do. Earn your trust through our actions. You've seen how we approach challenges, how we're willing to adapt and work with you, not against you." Alec added, "Look, I know this sounds all warm and fuzzy, but we're not naive. We know it's not easy, and we're not here to say everyone will just hold hands and sing songs. But it starts with the two of us. 3 of us, actually, sitting down and saying, 'Okay, how do we make this work?'" Orks leaned back, her gaze piercing. "And you believe that our peoples, so different in their history and culture, can truly coexist?" Jonas met her eyes without hesitation. "I do, because we're not as different as it might seem. We all want to survive, to thrive, to protect what we care about. If we focus on those common goals, we can find a way to move forward together." Orks' expression remained unreadable for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice quieter, almost introspective. "You may be right. For too long, I have relied on fear to maintain order. Perhaps it is time to try something else." Alec tilted his head. "Are you saying you're willing to give this a shot?" She glanced at him, a hint of amusement in her eyes. "I am saying that I am willing to explore this partnership you propose. But know that the road ahead will be challenging. My advisors will not approve, and there will be resistance from many corners of the Dominion." Jonas leaned forward, his voice steady. "We're not asking for an easy path. We're asking for a chance." Orks regarded him silently for a moment, then gave a small nod. "Very well. I will draft a provisional agreement. A trial period, if you will. During this time, we will share certain resources, exchange knowledge, and allow limited trade. If this proves mutually beneficial, we can expand upon it." Jonas smiled. "That's all we're asking for. A chance to show that this can work." Alec sat up straighter. "Sounds like progress to me." Orks' gaze lingered on Jonas for a moment longer. "I have seen many leaders come and go, each claiming to bring change. Most were little more than pretenders. But you, Jonas Trevane, are different. You do not carry yourself as a conqueror or a ruler. You are genuine." Jonas nodded. "That's because I'm not here to conquer or rule. I'm here to build something better." She allowed herself the faintest of smiles. "We shall see if your optimism is well placed." As the meeting concluded, Orks stood, signaling that their discussion was over. Jonas and Alec followed her lead, rising from their seats. Alec glanced at Jonas as they walked back through the palace corridors. "You know, for a guy who claims he's not a leader, you sure do act like one." Jonas shook his head. "I'm not leading, Alec. I'm just doing what needs to be done." "Well, keep doing it. I think we might actually be on to something here." As they returned to their quarters, Jonas felt a cautious optimism brewing. This was just the beginning, but it was a beginning nonetheless. And while the path forward wouldn't be easy, it was a step closer to the trust and cooperation they had been working toward all along. Chapter 8. A New Beginning. The last meeting in Orks' grand chamber felt less like a negotiation and more like a quiet farewell. The Queen's advisors were absent, leaving only the three of them, Jonas, Alec, and Erixel. The crystalline throne room, with its towering arches and shimmering light patterns, now felt oddly intimate. "I have reviewed the provisional agreements," Erixel said, her voice measured. "Our initial exchange of knowledge and resources will begin immediately. You will receive the first shipment of rare minerals by the next cycle, and we expect the first transfer of human agricultural technology to arrive shortly after." Jonas nodded. "We'll make sure everything is ready on our end. This is just the first step, but it's an important one." Alec folded his arms, leaning against the smooth wall. "First step, sure, but we're still going to have to work our asses off to keep things moving. The real test is going to come when people on both sides start asking why we're not just grabbing what we want by force." Erixel's gaze shifted to him, her expression unreadable. "You speak plainly, Dr. Morgan. Do you not believe in the path you have chosen?" Alec raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I believe in it. I'm just saying it's not going to be easy. But then again, nothing worth doing ever is." Jonas smiled faintly. That's Alec's way of saying he's all in. Erixel regarded them both for a moment before stepping down from her throne. Her movements were graceful, deliberate, yet there was an unfamiliar softness to her demeanor. She approached the two men, stopping just a pace away. "Your efforts have been unexpected," she admitted. "I did not think it possible for a species so young to demonstrate such ingenuity and determination. I underestimated you, Jonas Trevane. And you, Dr. Morgan." Alec smirked, tilting his head. "You're not the first, and you won't be the last." Jonas shook his head. "What he means is, thank you. We appreciate the chance to prove ourselves." Erixel's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "Then do not squander it. The trust we have begun to build is fragile. You must ensure that your people uphold their end of the agreement." Jonas stepped forward, meeting her gaze directly. "We will. And we hope that you and your people will see the benefits of cooperation." She studied him silently for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then, with a slight incline of her head, she said, "I look forward to seeing what the future holds for this alliance." The conversation felt final, yet unspoken words lingered in the air. Erixel turned back to her throne, signaling the end of the meeting. Alec glanced at Jonas, his brow furrowing. "So that's it? We're done here?" Jonas nodded. "For now, we've set things in motion. The rest will take time." As they walked through the palace corridors one last time, Alec clapped Jonas on the shoulder. "You know, for a guy who's not a politician, you sure pulled this off." Jonas chuckled. "I just did what needed to be done. And I had some help." Alec grinned. "Damn right you did." The shuttle ride back to the human embassy felt quieter, the weight of what they had accomplished finally sinking in. Alec stared out the viewport, watching the gleaming towers of Xintha Prime shrink into the distance. "So, you think she's really on board with this? I mean, for real?" Jonas leaned back in his seat, thoughtful. "I think she's open to it, but it's going to take time for her people and ours to fully accept it. That's the real challenge now." Alec nodded slowly. "Yeah, but I think we can handle it." Jonas smiled. "Me too." As the shuttle approached their base, the sun set over the Xinthan capital, casting the alien city in hues of gold and purple. Jonas and Alec knew that this was only the beginning, and the road ahead would be anything but smooth. But they had made the first step together, and that was enough for now.